Most of Week 8 is in the books, and it started back on Thursday with a game that went down to the wire between the Bucs and Bills. And despite the loss for Tampa, I thought this was somewhat encouraging, and here's why. There's coaches that win games and there's coaches that lose games, and Todd Bowles loses games. He's as non-aggressive as they come when it comes to in-game decisions, and despite him holding the team back and despite playing in a tough place like Buffalo, Tampa nearly won. I know Tampa fans would want the non-call at the end addressed, but very rarely do pass interferences get called on Hail Marys. I have said for a while that I think Todd Bowles is a fantastic defensive coordinator, but is not a head coach, and I think this game proved that. For Buffalo, yes, this was a tighter win than you would like, but the big takeaway was that it was very nice to see playmakers not named Stefon Diggs get involved, and heavily. That's nothing against Diggs, of course, as much as it is to say they need other players to step up if they have intentions of playing in late January. And this was a win Buffalo desperately needed as they are on to Cincinnati. And we are moving on to Sunday's games, and the first one we are discussing is Texans-Panthers. This was a game between the number 1, 2, and 3 overall picks, as remember, the Texans drafted both CJ Stroud and Will Anderson. For Houston, this was a bad offensive game from start to finish. Yes, you have a rookie quarterback, and yes, there will be growing pains, but you had 2 weeks to prepare for an 0-6 team, and you dialed up 229 total yards and 13 points in a loss. The NFL changes extremely fast, and a month ago I would have thought Bobby Slowick was the next head coach in line, but at this point it's not a sure thing. And this loss especially stings because Houston could very easily be 5-2 with 5 straight wins. For Carolina, everyone will want to make this a Bryce versus CJ thing, and I'll say it, in this game, Bryce Young outplayed CJ Stroud. The flashes are there for Bryce, and I think he is the guy for them. But I also think they're going to have to trade Brian Burns to be able to acquire him a true number 1 receiver for 2024 and beyond. Great win for Carolina, and I think today was a glimpse of what Bryce Young can be at the NFL level. To North Jersey to discuss a game between Zach Wilson and Tommy DeVito. Not surprisingly, in a game where you're down to your third-string quarterback, the Giants ran the ball, and ran the ball, and ran the ball. Saquon Barkley had an unworldly 36 carries, and the Giants fell short with a 13-10 loss to the Jets. But what was particularly bad about this game for the Giants was how they lost this game. They gave up 2 29-yard passing plays at the end of the fourth quarter to allow Greg Zuerlein to kick a 35-yarder to send this to overtime. This was the definition of ugly football, and with the Giants at 2-6, we know their season is over, but I worry about their future after winning a playoff game just 1 year ago. For the Jets, a win over the other New York team always feels good, and people in the tri-state area, despite how ugly this game was, are definitely going into the office tomorrow talking shit, and good for them. But the Jets are 4-3, and there were clips of Aaron Rodgers throwing passes pre-game, and to win this game, even as ugly as it was, is only more good news for the Jets. Falcons-Titans is up, and there's 2 words from this game. Will Levis. Will Levis threw for 4 passing touchdowns in his debut, and he is on his way to being a future Hall of Fame quarterback. There's no denying it after this game, and all jokes aside, what a performance by Will and the Titans. The big takeaway is simple: roll with him for the rest of the year, and if at some point he stinks or has a few bad games, which is to be expected from rookie quarterbacks, there's enough flash from this game alone to convince you to give him another chance. Also, these are my favorite uniforms in football, and I did want to note how sweet they are. For Atlanta, Desmond Ridder is still not the guy. The play calling has not been great, and they need pass rush. The trade deadline is Tuesday, and they need to make a call for Montez Sweat. It would benefit both franchises, assuming they get the long-term contract done, of course. But this is a chance to get a good pass rusher for what would probably equate to a second-round pick. Roll with Heineke for the rest of the year, and trade for Montez Sweat. Up to Indy to discuss Saints-Colts, and this was the first game all year where the offense legitimately showed up for New Orleans. I have been vocal about the canning of OC Pete Carmichael, but this game showed he can be a good play caller when it comes hell or high water. They had a 300-yard passer, they ran for over 160 yards and 3 touchdowns as a team, and they put up 38 points. Rashid Shaheed had 3 receptions for 153 yards and a touchdown, and they had 8 guys catch a pass. When you play a game like this, there's simply not many games you're going to lose, and this was truly one of the most complete games any offense has put together in 2023. For Indy, this was a very annoying game to sit through as a fan of the Colts, not just from a results standpoint, but from play calling too. Jonathan Taylor was playing really well, and they should have continued feeding him, but they didn't, and I don't know why. The secondary is bad, and we know that, but there's things you can do to try to help them out, like run the clock and keep the opposing offense off the field. 12 carries for Jonathan Taylor is unacceptable. Next up is Jags Steelers, and the Jags are 6-2 for the third time in their young franchise's history. And I know Jags fans aren't the happiest with how their team played, but I would counter with this. Not only is a win, but think about where you were 365 days ago. You were a 2-6 team and just lost to the Broncos. I know it's easy to dismiss an ugly win, but the steps this organization has taken in a year are steps other teams are truly jealous of. They enter their Week 9 bye at 6-2 and will have their work cut out for them as they play San Francisco in Week 10. For the Steelers, this loss obviously stinks, but there's bigger problems. How long will Kenny be out? How long will Minka be out? The offensive play calling is still bad, and Mitch was atrocious in the time he played. I also think it's unacceptable to not give George Pickens at least 9 or 10 targets a game. Also, yes, Steelers fans, I know the refs were bad, but there was going to be a point where winning bad games was going to come to an end, and ultimately it was in Week 8 to the Jags. From Pittsburgh to the PA Turnpike to the center of the universe in Breezewood, Pennsylvania, eventually down to Landover, Maryland, we go to discuss Eagles Commanders. Yes, this loss stings for Washington, but you're in a year where the coaching staff will probably get fired on Black Monday, and Sam Howell looked absolutely fantastic in this game. My big takeaway from this game is, what could Sam Howell be if you gave him a competent head coach? I don't think Ron Rivera is a good head coach, and I think that's demonstrated every week, but what if you gave him Ben Johnson or Jim Harbaugh? For Philly, they scored 38 points in this game despite fumbling not once, but twice inside the 5-yard line. They have also played sloppy at times in 2023 and are 7-1 on the year. They still haven't played a complete game, and they are again 7-1. Maybe this is a hot take, but Philly at this specific point in time would be my pick to go to the Super Bowl. Now from Philly to Dallas to discuss Rams-Cowboys. For the Rams, this was going to be a tough game to win, as going into Dallas off their bye week with time to regroup was never going to be fun. They gave up 43 points, and this was definitely one of the worst losses in the Sean McVay era. They're 3-5 on the season and playing Green Bay next weekend. Despite how bad the Rams looked in this game, I do think they can improve to 4-5 before their Week 10 bye. For Dallas, Dak threw for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, and CeeDee Lamb went for $158 and 2 scores. With the years A.J. Brown and Tyreek Hill are having, I truly think we're at a point where CeeDee Lamb is borderline underrated. I know there's been weekly recaps where I've said Dallas looks like a Super Bowl team, and it's because of games like this. This was an absolutely huge win right before they head into Philly in Week 9. Across the Gulf of Mexico to talk Pats Dolphins. The Patriots had a huge win in Week 7 over Buffalo, but came back down to earth with a 14-point loss to the Dolphins in Week 8. And I think this game showed what we've thought for a little while now. Mac Jones is not the guy. Having 218 yards of total offense is not going to win many games, and especially not against the Dolphins. I really think this is a 6 or 7 win team, which will be just enough to miss on the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks. For Miami, they swept the Patriots and improved to 6-2 on the year and have a huge game next week in Germany against the Chiefs. It was easy to overlook the Patriots and think about next week's game, but they did a good job of taking care of business. Tua threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and for the first time this year, both Jalen and Tyreek went for over 100. This was a good win for Miami, but the real test is next week. And in 2 games against the Bills and Eagles this year, elite teams, they're 0-2 with 2 double-digit losses. To Lambeau for Packers, Vikings, and for Green Bay, guys, this is not a good team. The offense doesn't have good players, and it shows every week. I don't think this is a Jordan Love versus the weapons thing either. I think it's both. They're not good, and they had an egregiously slow start to a game again. There was a point in this game where Minnesota had 12 first downs to Green Bay 0. I don't know what the answer is because they're also very young, but it is bad right now in Green Bay. For the Vikings, well, I am a Vikings fan, but guys, I don't know what to say. I legitimately thought the Vikings would improve to 9-4 over the course of the next month and some change, but I'm devastated after this loss. This was supposed to be a huge win over a division rival, and it is, but at the cost of a season-ending injury. This could be an entire video in itself in terms of what to do at the quarterback position, but what I will say positively is Jordan Addison is a great receiver. He will be a great receiver for a long time, and the Vikings absolutely nailed their 2023 first-round pick. but this win stinks. To the desert to talk Ravens-Cardinals, and this was a classic trap game for the Ravens. They dominated the Lions in Week 7, and I wouldn't have been surprised at all if they lost this game. With Cincy winning in San Francisco, this game was imperative for Baltimore to do what they should do against an inferior team, which is take care of business. There's no huge takeaways for the Ravens, and it was not a great game, but I do want to specifically shout out the Gus Bus for scoring 3 touchdowns in this game. This was a lot closer than Ravens fans would have liked, but 6-2 is 6-2. For Arizona, 10-7 is still on the table, but in all seriousness, this is going to be a better team than a lot of people think in 2024. They're scrappy as hell and fight to the end, and that's huge for a rebuilding team. They're in most games, and they will be getting Kyler back soon, and they could have a trio next year of Marquise Brown, Michael Wilson, and Marvin Harrison Jr. They will be fine in the long run. To Seattle for Browns Seahawks, and the biggest takeaway for the Browns is they need a quarterback. Saying a team is Super Bowl caliber is bold, especially for a team that has a singular playoff win in the past 15 years, but they're a damn good team outside the quarterback position. They were in position to win this game and to be 5-2, and in the AFC of all conferences, there's a substantial difference between 5-2 and 4-3. And if you're a Browns fan, you can't help but think this got away. For Seattle, what a day. Seahawks win and the 49ers lose, and they're now sitting on top of the NFC West. They're a team nobody will want to play down the stretch because they can beat you in a variety of ways, and I am asking Seattle to do only one thing moving forward: feed both running backs more. They each averaged over 8 yards per carry in this game, and while that's obviously not sustainable, feed them and grind teams down over the course of the game. They're a very, very good football team and have a big game next week in Baltimore. Chiefs, Broncos, and I guess Mahomes' Linsanity run is over, and it's time for Andy Reid to get fired after a 15-point loss to Denver. And for Kansas City, every team has ugly games. Everyone. Last year it was the Colts, and this year it is the Broncos. They didn't play good offensively in really any sense, and they turned the ball over multiple times. Obviously, I was joking about the Andy Reid part, but the offense hasn't looked great, or at least the Chiefs standard we're used to for a lot of 2023. I think they will be fine in the long run, but I also think this was a good, humbling loss for them. For Denver, nobody, and I mean nobody, beats the Denver Broncos 17 straight times. They beat the Chiefs and ran the ball 40 times in this game for over 150 yards, and while the Super Bowl is not back on by any means, a win is a win, and especially over the Chiefs. The big takeaway is they beat Patrick Mahomes for the first time since he's been a starter, and that's all that matters right now in the Mile High City. To the Bay Area for Bengals 49ers, and the Bengals are back. I made a mistake last year and said after they started out 0-2 that the Bengals were in serious trouble, and I thought they were at a point this year, more so due to the calf injury Joe Burrow had, and when they were 1-3 with 2 20-plus point losses, with Joe not looking healthy in those games. But they've won 3 in a row and beat the 49ers by double digits off their bye. They're back. Joe Burrow completed on a worldly 87.5% of his passes in this game and threw for nearly 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. For San Francisco, guys, I said after the Cowboys game that this team may be on pace to be a historic team and that anybody would be lucky to slow this team down. They were 5-0 with an average margin of victory of nearly 20 points. And since then, they're 0-3 and haven't looked anywhere close to the Super Bowl caliber team that we saw in weeks 1 through 5. This is bad for San Francisco. They have a Week 9 bye, and that is the best thing that could happen for them at this point in time. I believe in Kyle Shanahan, but this is very bad for them at the moment. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 26% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps the channel tremendously. My Patreon and Twitter links are in the description if you'd like to support the channel, and until the next video, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.